Today is the 12th of December, 2023. I'm almost finished with the Sagas of Icelanders. I've got 30 pages left. I'm now on the stories, which is additional information beyond the actual sagas. There are two sagas that were towards the back that were the reason I purchased this book. My grandmother, on my mom's side, has ancestors that were in Labrador, region of Newfoundland, which is up in the northeast above America. And then the Vikings later were inland even as far as Minnesota. I had previously spoken in the parts on this book review that we watched The Unexplained with William Shatner, and it talked about Vikings being in America, and these tales tell the story of that. And part of that show that was of interest, and they didn't really go into detail, is why there was remnants of settlement in Newfoundland and Labrador, and then they just disappeared all of a sudden. So this epic called, let's see, I'm not on the right page here. I wrote my page numbers down. I've got 3 or 4 stories I'm going to tell you about, but the one that seems the most informational is Eirik the Red's Saga, Eirik. And it seems to me there are 3 reasons that they left the Newfoundland area. One is because food started to become sparse. And there's a story in there about how a whale had beached itself and a whole bunch of them ate the whale meat and that it was bad and made them sick. And shortly thereafter, I'm not sure if it was connected to the whale or not, but a lot of them got ill. So I'm going to start reading from page 663 about the illness, and then it leads to ghosts, which were in some of the prior book sections that I'd mentioned before. So it says they spent the winter there. It then happened that sickness struck the farm shortly after the beginning of winter. The foreman named Gardy was an unpopular man. He was the first to fall ill and die. Not long until the inhabitants caught the sickness, one after the other, and died, until Thorstein Eriksson and Sigrid, the farmer's wife, fell ill too. One evening, Sigrid wanted to go to the outhouse, which stood opposite the door of the farmhouse. Gudrid went with her, and as they looked at the doorway, Sigrid cried, "Oh!" Gudrid spoke, "We have acted carelessly. You shouldn't be exposed to the cold at all. We must get back inside as quickly as we can." Sigrid answered, "I won't go out with things as they are. All of those are dead and standing there before the door. Among them I recognize your husband Thorstein and myself as well. How horrible to see it." When it had passed, she spoke, "I don't see them now." Thorstein, whom she had seen with the whip in his hand, ready to strike the dead, had also disappeared. They then entered the house. Before morning came, she was dead, and a coffin was made for her body. So it seems like for her sake, that was kind of a premonition, but she clearly saw ghosts. That same day, men were going fishing, and Thorstein accompanied them down to where the boats were beached. Towards dusk, he went again to check on their catch. Then Thorstein Eriksson sent him word to come to him, saying there was no peace at home, as the farmer's wife was trying to rise up and get into the bed with him. When he entered, she had reached the sideboards of the bed. He took hold of her and drove an axe into her breast. Then Thorstein Eriksson died near sundown. Thorstein told Gudrid to lie down and sleep. He would keep watch over the bodies that night. He said Gudrid did so and soon fell asleep. Only a little of the night had passed when Thorstein rose up, saying that he wished Gudrid to be summoned and wanted to speak to her. "It is God's will that I be granted an exception for this brief time to improve my prospects." Thorstein went to Gudrid, woke her, and told her to cross herself and ask the Lord for help. "Thorstein Eriksson has spoken to me and said he wanted to see you. It is your decision. I will not advise you either way." She answered, "It may be that there is a purpose for this strange occurrence. Will have consequences long to be remembered. I expect that God will grant me this protection. I will take the chance with God's mercy of speaking to him as I cannot escape any threat to myself. I would rather he need not look farther, and I suspect that that would be the alternative." Gudrid then went to see Thorstein, and he seemed to to her to shed tears. He spoke several words in her ear in a low voice, so that she alone heard, and said that those men rejoiced who kept their faith well, and it brought mercy and salvation. Yet he said many kept their faith poorly. These practices will not do, which have been followed here in Greenland after the coming of Christianity, burying people in unconsecrated grounds. They're talking about proper burials and how to avoid ghosts is what I'm getting out of this. Yeah, that's the bulk of that story. There's one other thing I want to mention is they had recently become Christians, the Vikings. Before that, they followed the Norse gods like Thor and Loki and all that stuff. And there was one guy that even said something about the food shortage about, well, when we were serving the Norse gods, we didn't have these problems or whatever. So anyway, that was the ghost story. Then on 671, I was talking about the constant attack that they were under. So I'm going to find out, where did that start? Oh boy. Oh gosh, I lost my place here. 671. They talked about getting an axe, and the natives were impressed with it, how it could chop, but then they busted it on a rock and thought, oh, it's no good because it got broken by a rock. The party realized that despite everything the land had to offer, they would be under constant threat of attack from its prior inhabitants. They made ready to depart for their own country. So see, that's why I think they left those areas, because there was a lot of fighting going on, and the illness and the food shortages. And sailing north along the shore, this is a terrible story. This was, I'll go into the time frame of this story in a second, but sailing north along the shore, they discovered 5 natives sleeping in skin sacks near the shore. Beside them, they had vessels filled with deer marrow blended with blood. They assumed these men to be outlaws and killed them. I'm not laughing because it's funny. It's horrible. But I was pondering the fact that it was they were fully barbaric when they were Norse followers. And when they become Christian followers, they're supposed to be more civilized. And they still were allowed, it seems, in their own minds, to do things like this, to find people and then label them a certain way and murder them. And so the fighting amongst themselves was tempered, because before that, it was constant fighting. The Norse gods were, they valued, bravery and epic fighting of that nature. So they were fighting all the time. But then I think they came to their senses in a way, because somebody told them, hey, you don't have to live like this. But then, like I said, they can selectively still engage in murder if they justified it. And that's pretty terrible. So you would say that this would probably be considered like a transition period from full barbarism to civilization, is what I get out of that. And the thing that's scary about it is people tend to think that this is like ancient history or whatever, but it wasn't that long ago. So I'm going to look up the beginning of this story, which is Eirik the Red's saga, and it should tell you the time frame here. Well, it's at the beginning of all of the Vinland stories, I guess. In general, it was about 1,000 years ago. I'm trying to find the actual number. Oh boy. They've got maps. Okay. So the time of action was around 970 to 1030. So here we are at 2023. So it's potentially even less than 1,000 years ago that people were pretty savage still, not really civilized. And it got me wondering about, are we really civilized now? I mean, we watch the news stories on TV and people kill their neighbors over little disputes, and people kill people out in public all the time. It's on the news. are we really living in civilization, or is it just like a false, I don't know what the word would be, presumption of civilization? Are we still at heart as bad as these guys were less than 1,000 years ago, where they assumed that they were outlaws, so they murdered them because they had basically a bowl with some meat and blood in it? It sounded like it was their food. So they're sleeping with their food on the shore, and they just decide to kill them. And I guess it's because they had been attacked by the natives when they arrived, that they feel like, well, these are the ones that keep attacking us. And they eventually left because they couldn't handle all that was going on. And it's just really disheartening when you read a lot of the history of the world. I don't know that we've changed that much. Maybe some people have changed and others have not. Like you see on TV, it seems like some people fully embrace societal norms and then the other ones don't want to. They'd rather have conflict. And you know what I'm talking about with the politics of the day. There's groups of people that seem to relish fighting in war, and they can't adapt their brain to being civilized. They only want to live like the old way, perhaps, their ancestral roots way. And just in general, I think it'd be better if we could all just learn to live and love each other like true Christianity says to do, right? Rather than, hey, those guys over there have some food that's got some blood in it, let's go kill them, or whatever. I don't know. It's kind of depressing, but this might be the last episode of the Sagas of Icelanders, but I was hoping to learn something more uplifting about, the ancestry on my mother's side, and a lot of violence, fighting over women, fighting over land. At one point, these guys come in and they don't have women with them, and the other people that live there have women, so they want to get the guys' women and take them. And the guys can either choose to fight back and defend, and if they lose, they probably both get killed. And if they don't fight back, they just take their women and walk away with them. And it's pretty brutal back then. I just wonder how different it is now. I hope it's not like that. Maybe a lot of us have a false feeling of society. I don't know. Anyway, I'm almost done with this book. I'll probably finish it today or tomorrow. Kind of depressing, actually.